If you ever find yourself wishing for a little excitement in your marriage, be careful what you wish for. Some surprises don't come with bows. They come with betrayal. And if you think winning the lottery is life-changing, wait until you find out your wife already cashed in her ticket and forgot to mention it. It all started on a Thursday, which felt fitting since Thursdays are generally forgettable. My wife, Emily, had her usual routines, and I had mine. We lived what I thought was a standard suburban life. A modest house, shared expenses, and the occasional treat-yourself weekend. Nothing too flashy, just steady. Emily had always been one for little indulgences, though. She loved her scratch-offs, those bright little rectangles of hope. "It's just for fun," she'd say, waving off my jokes about her retirement fund. She wasn't reckless about it, maybe picking up a few tickets each week when she stopped at the gas station. I never thought much of it. That was her thing, like how I had my fantasy football league. But in hindsight, maybe I should have paid more attention. The first crack in the facade came when I was cleaning out the junk drawer in our kitchen. You know the one, crammed with rubber bands, old receipts, and chargers for gadgets you don't own anymore. Among the chaos, I found a folded piece of paper. Nothing special, just a receipt for groceries. But there was a number scrawled on the back in Emily's handwriting, circled 3 times. At first, I didn't think much of it. Emily loved her lists and random notes. But something about the way it was circled made me pause. It wasn't her usual grocery shorthand or a reminder for an upcoming bill. It felt significant. I put it aside, intending to ask her about it later. But as luck, or fate, would have it, I didn't get the chance. That same afternoon, I was sorting through the pile of mail on our counter when I found a strange envelope. It was addressed to Emily, marked urgent in bold red letters, with no return address. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an official-looking header. The words made my stomach drop. Lottery winnings claim confirmation. It took a second for my brain to catch up. Lottery winnings? Since when? I skimmed the letter, noting the claim date and the amount. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to turn heads. Enough to change things. Enough to make you wonder why your wife never mentioned it. The date on the letter was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, and not a single word from Emily. My mind raced. This wasn't like finding loose change in the laundry. This was deliberate. Planned. And suddenly, little things started clicking into place. Her new phone, the sudden uptick in her self-care days, the extra nights she stayed out late under the guise of work events. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, or the lack of it. The ironic part? I hadn't even scratched the surface of what was really going on. There's something surreal about standing in your own kitchen, holding a letter that feels like a bomb. I stared at that piece of paper for what felt like an eternity, the numbers blurring together as my mind raced to piece things together. A part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe Emily had a perfectly reasonable explanation, some funny anecdote about a clerical error. But deep down, I knew better. The house suddenly felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your chest and makes the walls feel closer than they are. I set the letter down and walked to the living room, looking around as if I'd find clues hidden in plain sight. Nothing seemed out of place, but everything felt wrong. Emily came home that evening, cheerful as ever, her grocery bags rustling as she breezed through the door. I watched her unpack, placing each item in its designated spot with the ease of someone who didn't have a care in the world. My stomach twisted. How could she act so normal when this letter existed? I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I asked about her day, her errands, her plans for the weekend. She answered everything with her usual charm, her smile never faltering. If she noticed anything off about my tone, she didn't show it. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Little things that once seemed insignificant now stood out like neon signs. The extra shopping bags she tucked away in the closet, the new pair of shoes she claimed were on sale, the text notifications she was suddenly more protective of. Then there was the drawer. Emily had a small desk in the guest bedroom where she kept personal papers, old photos, greeting cards, and other mementos. It wasn't locked, and I'd never had a reason to look through it. But after finding that lottery letter, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more she wasn't telling me. Late one night, When Emily was asleep, I opened a drawer. At first, it was just what I expected: birthday cards, receipts, random knickknacks. But as I sifted through the pile, I found a small envelope tucked between two notebooks. Inside was a bank statement. The balance was far higher than I'd ever seen in our joint account. The name on the account wasn't ours, it was Emily's. A private account. The deposit date matched the claim date on the lottery letter. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just forgetfulness. Emily had gone out of her way to hide this from me, to keep me in the dark while she built a secret life right under my nose. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. Over breakfast, I casually brought up the lottery. I saw a story online. I said, feigning disinterest. Some guy won big and didn't tell his wife. Can you imagine? Emily laughed, shaking her head. That's awful, she said, buttering her toast. How could someone do that? Her face didn't betray a single thing. But mine did. I smiled, nodded, and let the conversation drift to other topics. Inside, though, I was a storm. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even about the lies. It was about what those lies represented. And I was about to find out just how deep they went. People often say betrayal hits you like a bolt of lightning, sudden and devastating. But for me, it was more like a slow-motion car crash. Each new revelation felt like another step closer to impact, and I couldn't look away, no matter how much I wanted to. After discovering Emily's secret account, I couldn't stop thinking about what else she might be hiding. It wasn't just the money, it was the layers of deception. The casual smile over breakfast, the affectionate gestures, the little lies woven into the fabric of our daily lives. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, while Emily was at her book club, I made the decision to dig deeper. I started with her email. Emily had always been the type to save everything: receipts, confirmations, random newsletters. It wasn't hard to find her login credentials. She used the same password for everything. As I scrolled through her inbox, my stomach churned. Most of it was harmless, but then I found a folder marked personal. It was a rabbit hole I wasn't ready for. The email started innocently enough. Exchanges with a financial advisor about discrete investments, updates about the lottery deposit, plans for a weekend getaway. But then there were messages from someone named Ryan. Ryan wasn't a co-worker or a distant cousin. Ryan was her lover. The emails were explicit. Plans, pet names, private jokes. And the dates matched her so-called book club nights. My hands shook as I clicked through the messages, each one confirming what I'd already feared. Emily had built an entirely separate life, and I was just a supporting character in the facade. But it didn't stop there. One email stood out: a confirmation for a private suite at a luxury resort. The dates overlapped with a weekend I'd spent visiting my parents. Emily had told me she was too busy with work to join me, but now I knew the truth. The confirmation included a guest list. 2 names: Emily and Ryan. I felt like I was drowning, my chest tight, and my thoughts spiraling. How long had this been going on? Was this just a fling, or had she been planning an escape? The next day, I decided to confront Ryan. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe an apology, maybe anger, but I needed answers. I found his address in one of the emails and drove to his house after work. It was a modest place, nothing extravagant, but when I rang the doorbell, I wasn't greeted by Ryan. I was greeted by a woman holding a toddler. "Can I help you?" she asked, her brow furrowed. I stammered something about a package mix-up, and she nodded, pointing to a pile of deliveries by the door. But as I walked away, I couldn't stop thinking about her. That was Ryan's wife. He wasn't just cheating with Emily. He was married too. Suddenly, the scale of the betrayal felt even larger. This wasn't just about me or Emily or Ryan. There were other lives entangled in this mess, other people who didn't deserve the pain we were about to face. But I wasn't going to let it slide. If Emily and Ryan thought they could play us for fools, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The storm wasn't just coming, it was already here. If finding out about Emily's affair felt like a punch to the gut, learning Ryan was married turned it into a full-blown free fall. It wasn't just me who'd been deceived, it was his wife, his family. The layers of betrayal piled up so high, I felt buried under the weight of it. But this wasn't the time to lie down and let them win. I spent the next few days piecing together everything I could. Emily's emails were a goldmine, not just for their content, but for the patterns they revealed. She and Ryan had been meticulous in their planning, using coded language, avoiding paper trails, but they underestimated just how much they'd left behind in the digital age. One email included a scanned itinerary for an upcoming trip. They'd booked a week at a luxury villa in Palm Springs, complete with spa treatments and wine tours. The trip was scheduled for next month, during what Emily had claimed would be a work retreat. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'd been slogging through the daily grind, she'd been sipping Chardonnay and living out her fantasy with Ryan. But here's the thing about fantasies. They crumble under the weight of reality. And I was about to make sure their dream getaway turned into a nightmare. First, I reached out to Ryan's wife. I debated this for hours, wondering if I should spare her the pain or let her remain in blissful ignorance. But in the end, I realized she deserved to know the truth. I compiled the emails, the resort confirmation, and a detailed timeline, packaging them into a folder labeled "For Your Eyes Only." Dropping it off at her doorstep felt surreal. My heart pounded as I rang the bell and walked away, hoping she'd read it when she was alone. I couldn't imagine what she'd feel: anger, heartbreak, humiliation, but I knew it was better than living a lie. Next, I focused on Emily. Confronting her outright felt too easy, too satisfying. No, I wanted her to feel the same sense of unraveling I had. Her trip to Palm Springs gave me the perfect opportunity. Using her login credentials, I accessed her reservation details. I called the villa, pretending to be Ryan, and canceled their stay. Then, I booked the same dates under my name, ensuring I'd be there when they arrived. But I wasn't done yet. I reached out to the financial advisor Emily had been emailing. Posing as her concerned spouse, I asked for an update on her investments, citing unusual activity as my reason. He hesitated at first, but eventually spilled the details. Emily had transferred most of her lottery winnings into a joint account with Ryan. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just an affair, it was an escape plan. She wasn't just stepping out on me. She was planning to leave me entirely, taking her newfound wealth and her new partner with her. The betrayal burned deeper than ever. But instead of despair, I felt a strange sense of clarity. If Emily wanted a clean break, I'd make sure it was anything but. When the day of their trip arrived, I packed my bags and drove to Palm Springs. I checked into the villa early, setting up in the same suite they'd reserved. The staff didn't question my presence. As far as they knew, I was the rightful guest. I spent the afternoon preparing, printing out every piece of evidence I'd collected: emails, receipts, photos. I laid them out on the coffee table, a visual representation of the lies and deceit they'd built their relationship on. When Emily and Ryan finally arrived that evening, they looked as smug and carefree as ever. But the moment they stepped through the door and saw me sitting there, their faces changed. Shock, confusion, panic. It was all there, written across their expressions like a confession. "Surprise," I said, gesturing to the table. "You left a trail." The silence was deafening, the weight of their betrayal hanging in the air like a storm cloud. And this was just the beginning. There's something almost comical about watching two people caught red-handed try to play innocent. Emily and Ryan stood frozen in the doorway, their faces cycling through an entire spectrum of emotions: shock, fear, guilt, and my favorite, pure, unfiltered panic. "Don't just stand there," I said, leaning back in the armchair like I owned the place. "Come in. After all, you booked this little getaway, didn't you?" Ryan was the first to speak, his voice trembling as he tried to muster some semblance of authority. "Well, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I gestured to the coffee table, where I'd meticulously laid out every shred of evidence. The emails, the receipts, the bank transfers, it was all there, neatly organized and impossible to deny. "Let's call it a housewarming," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "I thought you'd appreciate a little decoration. Turns out betrayal looks great on paper." Emily finally found her voice, but it was weak, trembling under the weight of her unraveling plans. "Alex, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, spare me," I snapped, cutting her off. "You've had weeks, months to come clean. But instead, you and your boyfriend here decided to play house with my money, my trust, and my time. So don't even try to spin this. Her face crumpled, but I wasn't done. I turned to Ryan, who looked like he wanted to meld into the floor. And you, how's your wife doing? Oh, wait, I already know. She got my little care package. Hope you're ready to explain this to her when you get back. Ryan's face turned an alarming shade of red. You had no right. No right? I laughed, the sound cold and hollow. You're standing in my wife's life, spending her stolen winnings, and planning your little love nest with money that isn't even yours. And you're worried about rights? He didn't have an answer for that. Emily, desperate to regain some control, tried to approach me. Alex, please, let's just talk about this. We can work something out. I stood, towering over her as I spoke, my voice low but cutting. Work something out? You already worked it out, didn't you? Every secret email, every transfer, every lie. You didn't just betray me. You planned an escape, Emily. You wanted to leave me in the dust while you played house with this idiot. Her tears started then, but they didn't move me. Not this time. I pulled out one last ace from my pocket. The cancellation notice for the villa. Oh, and by the way, this little vacation of yours? It's over. Your reservation's canceled. I already spoke to the manager. This room's in my name now. So pack your bags, or don't. You won't be staying here. Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Ryan looked ready to bolt, but I wasn't about to let them off that easily. And just so you know, I added, turning to Ryan, your wife? She's filing for divorce. And since I was kind enough to include details about your little joint account, I'm sure her lawyer will have a field day with that. His composure shattered. You son of a... Careful. I interrupted, holding up a finger. You're already in deep enough. Don't make it worse. The room fell silent again, the weight of the confrontation settling over us like a suffocating fog. Finally, Emily grabbed her bag and turned to leave, her face streaked with tears. Ryan followed, his shoulders hunched in defeat. As they walked out the door, I called after them. Oh, and Emily, don't forget to close the joint account. Wouldn't want your boyfriend getting cold feet and taking the rest of your winnings. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving me alone in the villa. The silence was deafening, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like freedom. I poured myself a glass of the complimentary champagne they'd ordered, raising it in a mock toast to their spectacular downfall. Here's to betrayal, I muttered to the empty room, and to making sure they'll never forget it. There's a strange, hollow silence that comes after a storm. At first, you feel relief, but then the echoes settle in, the damage, the debris, the undeniable truth that nothing will ever be the same. But as I sat in the villa, sipping the champagne Emily and Ryan had so thoughtfully ordered for their romantic getaway, I realized something. I wasn't the one left picking up the pieces. The fallout began immediately. Ryan's wife didn't just take the evidence I handed her and cry into her pillow. She weaponized it. Within days, she froze their shared accounts, changed the locks on their house, and filed for divorce. She didn't just expose him to their friends and family. She blew up his carefully crafted reputation like a stick of dynamite. By the time she was done, Ryan wasn't just a cheater. He was a cautionary tale. And Emily? Well, she thought she could bounce back. She'd always been the master of spin, weaving her lies into something palatable, even sympathetic. But the thing about suburban gossip is that it's relentless. Once word got out about the lottery winnings, the secret accounts, and the affair, her social standing crumbled like a poorly built sandcastle. She tried to play the victim, of course. Alex humiliated me, she told anyone who'd listen. He overreacted. But the evidence spoke for itself. Emails, receipts, bank statements. It all painted a picture of a woman who had meticulously planned her betrayal and still thought she could have it all. The real poetic justice, though, came with the money. Emily had staked her future on those lottery winnings, funneling them into secret investments and a joint account with Ryan. What she didn't know was that I'd already set the wheels in motion to freeze it all. The financial advisor, bless his cautious nature, flagged the account after my well-timed concerns about unusual activity. By the time Emily tried to access it, it was locked up tighter than a vault. Legal investigations followed, And with Ryan's wife throwing her own lawyers into the mix, Emily's fortune turned into a liability overnight. She sent me messages, dozens of them. At first, they were desperate pleas. Let's fix this. We can talk. Then came the anger. You've ruined my life. I hope you're happy. Each one felt like a victory lap, a reminder that her carefully constructed house of cards had finally collapsed. I never responded. Instead, I turned my attention to myself. The house we'd shared, once a place I couldn't imagine leaving, became just another item on the checklist. I sold it, wiped it clean of her presence, and used the money to start fresh. A new city, a new job, and a new companion, a golden retriever I named Lucky. Lucky, and I settled into a quiet routine, one free of lies and hidden agendas. I started reconnecting with old friends, people I'd drifted from during my years of bending over backward to be the perfect husband to a woman who didn't deserve it. But the final nail in Emily's coffin came 6 months later. A mutual friend sent me a photo. Emily, standing behind the counter of a cheap diner, her smile stretched thin as she served coffee to strangers. She'd burned through what little money she had left, and with her reputation in tatters, this was the best job she could find. Her lottery winnings were gone, drained by legal fees, penalties, and the lavish life she tried to build with Ryan. And Ryan? He disappeared after his divorce was finalized, leaving Emily to face the wreckage alone. I'd like to say I felt pity for her, but the truth is I didn't. Emily's downfall wasn't an accident or bad luck. It was the inevitable consequence of her own greed and deceit. As for me, I finally felt free, not just from her, but from the version of myself who had once been blind to the truth. Now, when I think back to everything that happened, I don't feel anger or regret. I feel grateful. Grateful that I saw her for who she really was before it was too late. Grateful that I walked away with my dignity intact. And when I take Lucky for walks in the park, watching him chase after squirrels and bask in the sunlight, I can't help but smile. Because in the end, I didn't just survive her betrayal. I thrived in its wake. The best part? I don't need a lottery ticket to feel like I've won.